Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Astro Consciousness channel. I'm Millie, and I am here to give you your weekly forecast of August 12th through the 18th. In this channel, we talk about the astrological energy of the week ahead and how you can implement it into your spiritual and personal growth. Now, I want to thank you all so much for subscribing, for your comments, for your likes. It means a lot to me. I love connecting with those of you who share your sun, moon, rising in the comments. I love connecting with you in that way. Thank you so much for sharing your stories with me, for sharing what's happening in your life. That's very generous of you. I don't take that for granted. Things I'm doing right now is giving you, mini horoscopes around the current Mercury retrograde that we are in the middle of. And by the way, this is a big week for that Mercury retrograde. So if you want some, a mini horoscope, let me know in the comments, your sun, moon, rising, and I will comment back. As always, let's recap a little bit of where we're coming from in order to understand where we are headed. So we're coming from a week in which we started the Mercury retrograde that started in the sign of Virgo and is eventually going to make its way back into Leo. I don't know about you, but that first week, all of last week with Mercury retrograde in Virgo, a lot personally, a lot came up for me. It was a very emotionally heavy week for me, where in true Virgo fashion, I was unable to skip any thoughts, any of the details around memories, right? Any of the details around certain situations. That is the gift of Virgo, is that it doesn't allow us to overlook things. It gifts us with the ability of focusing in on things so that we begin to live a life that is much more honest and authentic, right? Now, I say that because to live with integrity with the self, to live an authentic life means that we have to get very honest about what's in here, and how that's coming out in the world, how that's manifesting in our relationships. And from there, being able to ask ourselves, is this aligned with who I am? So I bring this up because, one, it is a gift. That is the gift that Virgo gives us. And it can feel overwhelming, which for me it did. It felt incredibly overwhelming. It was a rough week. It was just a mental health rough week. And so I'd be curious to hear in the comments if you feel open to share what came up for you around that. But Virgo is this energy that doesn't skip a step, it doesn't skip a beat. And that's the gift, because I've had to be very honest with myself about how I want to be in certain relationships in my life. And even leading up to that Mercury retrograde, having very honest conversations with important people in my life that could have very well made or break those relationships, right? At least from where I was standing at the time. After having the conversations, I realized, okay, it wasn't that dire, but it did feel that way. Why? Because we're not taught to have difficult conversations. We're simply taught to keep things in, to assume a lot of things, and then to create resentment that is really only a story that's being created in our own heads. And so it was an interesting first week with that Mercury retrograde. Now, we're still processing a lot of this, and I want to give you a heads up. The week ahead of the 12th through the 18th comes with a lot of energy as well, that because of that Mercury retrograde, we're going to be processing most of it internally. So I want to kind of prepare you for that so that you understand what's coming and that you do whatever it is you need to do, dig into your toolbox, right, of grounding, meditation, make sure that you have either your coaching or your therapy sessions scheduled, It would be a great week to schedule some kind of reading, either with me, tarot, any other astrologer. I did a Reiki session with a very powerful healer last week that it was a lot, and it really helped me calibrate in order to continue with this season. So these are our tools. This is why we have them. And these are the times in which we need to use them. So with that said, let's get started. So on Monday, August 12th, we have the moon in Scorpio squaring the sun in Leo. This is the first week after the new moon in Leo that we had on August 4th, okay? So normally what tends to happen, right, it's the first quarter moon, and it's a great time to take action towards the intentions that we set the previous week with the new moon. In this case, any intentions that may have been set with the new moon in Leo. Now, we have to be very mindful of the action that we're taking. If this is something, if you do use the lunar cycle in this way, this week would be a great week to take some action for something that you want to see manifested. So here are a few scenarios. One, and I'll give you an example. I'm about to launch a new website. I've been redoing my website with a dear friend of mine. And so what we're talking about, right, what we've been talking about between that Sunday and Monday is we're going to launch September 1st. So this is something that we've been working on slowly and steadily for a few months. So this isn't something necessarily new, but with the new moon in Leo, something that I had already started in the past, I said, okay, this is the month in which we're going to check all of the little things. We're going to test things, the little details, make sure that all the buttons click just right, that they take us to the links that they're meant to take us at, that people receive the discounts, that people receive their receipts when they buy something. So it's the testing period. If this is a week in which you're working on something that you have been working on before the Mercury retrograde, great week to take some kind of action behind the scenes, right? Because that's what that's what I'm doing with my web developer. We're working behind the scenes before we actually launch this out into the world on September 1st. So I give you that example because I think it does a pretty good job at illustrating the themes around the energy of the lunar cycle that we are under, right? Now, let's say that you did set an intention for something completely brand new with that new moon in Leo of August 4th. This is a week in which you can take some action. Maybe you can send an email, you can send a text, do very practical things, continue working behind the scenes with certain things. But you want to be mindful because later on in the week, we're going to have that midpoint conjunction between the sun and Mercury. So there are things that are perhaps you're going to gain new ideas, you're going to gain new insight. There are things that are going to come up that you didn't realize were there before, or that you didn't realize were an option. And that's going to be additional information for you to use towards that new moon intention. Okay. So it's a day, especially with the moon transiting the sign of Scorpio at the beginning of the week, that we can be very strategic in true Scorpio energy. And we can be very mindful about how we're moving forward with things. On the flip side, it is the moon transiting the sign of Scorpio, so we can be processing a lot of heavy energy, right? Now, mind you, Virgo, right, where Mercury is currently retrograde, and Scorpio in the zodiac actually get along because they're within a sextile of one another. And if we are being productive with this, if we're keeping our mindset in a state that is not just positive, but is really looking forward to certain things, this can actually be a week where we get a lot of practical little things done. In its lowest expression, the combination of Virgo and Scorpio is trying to control the things that we cannot control, becoming obsessive about the little things and then becoming overwhelmed and kind of just, closing out to the world, becoming very frustrated with the self or with the way that things are or are not working. So considering that this is the energy that we have on Monday, you really want to set the intention according to what you're experiencing in your life. So be very mindful of that. Tuesday, August 13th and Wednesday, August 14th, we are dealing with, working through, walking through the Mars-Jupiter conjunction in the sign of Gemini. Okay. This Mars-Jupiter conjunction in Gemini would normally be a great conjunction for initiating those intentions that we set with that new moon in Leo. It would be absolutely perfect to share something, to move forward with something, to collaborate, right? To share ideas with others. But it would absolutely be a great time to take action with something and be, incredibly optimistic about it. Okay. But here's the thing, right? This is a Mars-Jupiter conjunction in the sign of Gemini. Gemini's ruler is Mercury, and Mercury is currently retrograde. And so that tells us we got to pump the brakes because something is not going to move forward just yet because we don't have all of the information. Now, all of that information can be from an external place, right? From someone else, from somewhere else, research you haven't done, because you just don't even know to research for that thing. Or it can be because there has been something within you that hasn't landed just yet, something you haven't realized just yet. Okay, not only that, but that Mars-Jupiter conjunction is creating a square to Saturn in Pisces, okay? This is the square that we have been talking about for quite some time. It's a square that has been pretty active all year long. And what this is the desire for things to move a lot faster than they actually are because we're eager to take action. Mars, to go in a different direction. Mars, to check all of our options. Mars and Gemini, in order for us to grow and expand and make more money and, expand our horizons, all of the Jupiter things. But the 90-degree angle, the square to Saturn, is saying, no, not yet, not yet. And so that not yet is because of an external thing that you have no control over, right? That's what Saturn represents. And so Saturn, when it says not yet, it only means not yet. It's not saying an absolute no. Remember, Saturn is father time. Saturn is Chronos. Saturn really represents it's only a matter of time. It's just that now is not the time, right? So in a very practical way, how can this manifest within us? This is an accumulation of very vibrant, I want to say perhaps even aggressive energy between the Jupiter-Mars conjunction in the sign of Gemini, the sign of the mind, the sign of thoughts, the sign of information, the sign of more. These are all of my options. Which one am I going to pick? But I want to do this and I want to do that and I want to go here and I want to go there and I want it to happen now and I want it to happen yesterday, right? And then the square to Saturn can feel very frustrating because Saturn in Pisces is ruling a lot of our emotional processing. It's ruling a lot of our psychic processing. And with Saturn there in Pisces, it can feel very heavy. It can feel very dark, perhaps even negative. And then here we have this very vibrant energy that is wanting to move forward and wanting for things to happen now in Gemini. It's important that we understand these energies and how they function separately in order to understand what can happen when they clash in the way that they're clashing this week. And so this is an aspect that is perfecting Tuesday and Wednesday, but this is active. This has been active all of last week. It's going to be active all of August. The difference is that I think this week there is that it's the peak. It's the peak week. So what can that mean? That can manifest itself in a lot of frustration. It can manifest itself in a lot of impatience. It can manifest itself in feeling like the world and the universe is against you, right? So how do we move through that? Anytime that we have a Saturn-Mars conjunction, we need to understand that Saturn is going to win, right? Because there is a hierarchy in the planets. There is a hierarchy. And so Saturn is always going to be that authority figure over Mars, which is very jovial, very young in nature energy. And so whenever we have a Saturn-Mars connection, this is Saturn saying, no, 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 we're running a marathon, not a sprint. Because Mars and Jupiter alone is very much, I want to sprint. And I want to get there as soon as possible, as fast as possible. And we have to ask ourselves, why am I trying to rush this process so much? What am I trying to avoid? What feels so overwhelming, either externally or internally, that if I move through this quickly, then I don't have to deal with that, right? And even if it's not that deep, even if it's not anything that requires a lot of thought, this is the type of energy that is just asking you to be patient. Period. End of story. Saturn is saying we're running a marathon, not a sprint. And then the square between Saturn and Jupiter is saying, in order for you to grow, in order for you to expand, in order for the abundance, the riches, all of the Jupiter goodness to come in, you need to take your time to see what you're actually working with. There is an element of being very realistic here. There is something that is calling us to be very realistic about what we do have and what we don't have in order to move forward and grow in the long run. And so Jupiter and Gemini, in its higher expression, is saying, okay, if Saturn is telling me that there's some kind of limitation or I only have a certain something to work with, Jupiter and Gemini is saying, you have options. You have options. Research the options, reach out to people to check your options, right? So I'll give you a perfect example. I have a friend who is looking to move from where she's living, right? She's not looking to move immediately. Internally, emotionally, she's absolutely ready to leave where she's living because of a lot of other things that are happening that make her very unhappy, really unsettle her, right? So if she were to move with this energy differently, she would be incredibly frustrated that she can't find a place to live in now. And maybe there's a part of that. There is maybe a part of that because she truly is frustrated to be living where she's living. But she understands, I can't right now. I don't actually have the money to make that move right now. But what are my options, right? Outside of Zillow, who can I talk to? Who can I reach out to? What is my network? How do I research a different way of renting my next home where maybe it doesn't have to be as much as everyone else is charging, right? So again, the Jupiter is the optimism, is I believe that there's something actually really great for me. The Gemini is actually doing the research and checking your options. The square to Saturn is really going to show your emotional intelligence and your emotional maturity as you move through this month. That's what this is really about right now. And here's another thing. The moon is going to be transiting the sign of Sagittarius both Tuesday and Wednesday, activating a mutable cross. Why? Because the moon in Sagittarius is going to oppose the Jupiter-Mars conjunction in Gemini, right? There's tension right there. And then one leg of that cross is going to be Saturn and Pisces. And then the other leg of the cross is going to be Venus currently transiting the sign of Virgo. Now, Venus is at 11 degrees Virgo, so it's going to be somewhat of a wide, right? Somewhat of a wide mutable cross, but it's still a cross nonetheless. So what do mutable crosses activate? Anytime we have a cross, right? It can create tension. It can create a sense of pressure, right? Like the pressure cooker feeling, like I have to do something now, but I don't know what to do. And it's different because, for instance, a cardinal cross will make people take action, right? A fixed cross can feel like we're stuck, and it can feel like the world is caving in. A mutable cross can feel overwhelming in that there are so many options, we don't know which one to pick, or we know that there are so many options, but we just can't pick right now and feeling stuck. Crosses are very powerful catalysts and activators in our lives. But what they intend to do first is to activate and catalyze a lot of clarity within us that comes with a heavy dose of self-honesty. And so that's something that we're going to have to work through emotionally first, mentally, especially because Virgo and Gemini are involved, and get ourselves right. Get ourselves aligned between mind, body, spirit. That's what this is asking. The moon in Sagittarius is asking for the truth. And so what does that mean? Get very honest with yourself. Get very honest about your situation. Get very honest about what you want to deal with, what you don't want to deal with, right? Sagittarius is the sign of truth. And now the truth is subjective, right? Because we are all living different experiences. We are all having different manifestations, different things arising within us. So what is a truth that moon in Sagittarius is going to activate between Tuesday and Wednesday? So be very mindful of grounding, right? Yoga, meditation, walking, exercising, whatever it is that you need to move all of that very active, mutable energy, highly, highly suggest it. And make lists. I think that whenever Gemini and Virgo are involved in anything, making lists of things is very helpful. Writing is going to be very helpful. Journaling, free writing, getting that stuff out of your head, getting that stuff out of your body. If you happen to have either a coaching or a therapy session in any one of these 2 days, it's going to be really great just to get things out. It doesn't really strike me as a couple of days where you're necessarily going to gain new insight, but it can just be one of those sessions where your body needs to release. I highly, highly recommend that, right? Because the body is moving and processing a lot of things right now. Thursday, August 15th, we have the sun in Leo creating a trine to Chiron in Aries. Okay, so the sun in Leo is us. This is me. This is how I shine. This is what I know myself to be. There's a lot of pride in that, right? But the trine to Chiron in Aries is embracing that you may not know who you are right now. You may not have a clear idea right now, right? Because again, we're dealing with everything I just spoke about for Tuesday and Wednesday. We're dealing with that Mars-Jupiter conjunction in Gemini. And by the way, we're also headed towards a full moon in Aquarius next Monday. So this trine between the sun in Leo and Chiron in Aries, I think is actually very generous and gentle. It can be, depending on how we move through this energy. This is so new. I don't really know what to do. I feel overwhelmed. The acceptance that we might be moving through a sense of overwhelm and having kindness and compassion towards ourselves in that, right? Another way that this energy can manifest itself for you is understanding your wisdom, is really moving through this period of time as this is quite the, you know, the show, right? And I'm just watching it. I'm just moving through it. I trust that everything is unfolding in divine timing. I am unconditionally loved. I am unconditionally guided. This too shall pass, right? And this isn't bypassing. This is the understanding that you are a human being that is having a lot of experiences, and that your spirit, your spiritual being, is wanting to have these experiences, is wanting you to understand why all of this is really happening for you. That's why Mercury is retrograde. The cognitive mind takes a little bit of a backseat. So when a point like Chiron is activated, we're talking about a soul lesson. We're talking about what are the wounds that are being activated right now. So in a lower expression, this trine can be, the sun in Leo, I should know better. I should have known better. I should have made a different decision. I'm too old for this. This feeling of I should have it all together by now, or I should have known better. And the trine to Chiron in Aries is you not being very kind to yourself. Remember, trines don't necessarily manifest positive things. They just manifest what they manifest very easefully. That's what a trine really is. How it manifests depends on your own level of consciousness and your mindset, your belief system about yourself and about the manifestations in your life at the moment. But the invitation is, especially with that Chiron in Aries, is, change is hard. New things, getting used to new things can be hard. And there might be something to look forward to, absolutely, but the transition doesn't feel as easeful or glamorous or as joyful as I would have thought. There is an element here of something feeling hard. And that looks very different for everyone, right? It can be emotional, it can be physical, it can be literal, whatever it is. There is an element of this feels hard. Can you, in the higher expression of the sun in Leo, be just so kind to yourself and show yourself so much love? In the highest expression of Chiron in Aries, can you lean into your wisdom and say, yes, transitions can feel this way, and this will pass? There's a lot that's being activated this week that if you lead with the highest expression of Leo, which is unconditional love, you will move through it much more easily, and you will allow for the wise lessons that are trying to land for you right now to actually land and guide you towards the next logical step. Friday, August 16th, and Saturday, August 17th. It's a very active weekend, okay? So on that Saturday, we have Venus in Virgo create an opposition to Saturn in Pisces. And we have the second of 3 squares between Mercury retrograde and Uranus in Taurus, okay? So I'll get to that in a second because I spoke to you about this in last week's forecast. So first, let's talk about the Venus in Virgo opposing Saturn in Pisces. A Venus-Saturn connection, in its most basic interpretation, can feel like limitation of resources, right? Venus, limitation of money, limitation of pleasure, limitation of joy, right? A certain limit placed on our desire, right? The limit being represented by Saturn and all of the other themes being represented by Venus. But here's the thing. A Venus-Saturn connection will always call us to ask ourselves, what am I committed to, Saturn, and how are those commitments honoring the relationship that I have with myself, Venus? One of the things that I don't think is spoken about enough is how much Venus represents the relationship that we have with ourselves. Because it is in our natal Venus, and depending on what sign it's in, if we study it, if we look into it, if we look at the aspects, if we really tap into and harness into the Venus energy, and we live that Venus energy, through joyful experiences, right? Through honoring some of the desires, because that's where those things come from, our Venus sign. That is going to then strengthen the relationship, Venus, that we have with ourselves, that then is going to be reflected out into the world and bring relationships that match that reflection and that vibration into our lives. That's really what Venus represents, right? So for instance, I have a Venus in Sagittarius. I love to travel. I love to learn about astrology, right? I love to read. I love to put myself, not a lot, but I love to put myself in situations where I get to learn something new. Now, I have a Venus-Saturn conjunction natally. So that has been an interesting thing to work through. So it is through honoring my Venus in Sagittarius by doing the things that I love, by creating joyful experiences through the things that I love, that has actually brought me relationships in my life that even if the people in my life aren't into the same things, they are open to having conversations with me about the Sagittarian things, right? About the philosophy of life, about the bigger questions of life, about astrology, right? So even if I don't just have relationships with other astrologers, I have relationships with people that are curious, that are open-minded, right? To hear me talk about these things, that ask me questions, that have experiences of their own, Venus and Sagittarius, that then they get to share with me, that I get to learn from. And that's how my relationships feel joyful to me. But it requires that we first lean into the energy of our own Venus. Remember, the glyph of Venus in the zodiac looks like a handheld mirror. It is first the relationship with ourselves that then will be reflected out into the world. Okay, so Venus and Virgo right now is about the relationship that we have with our daily routine, the relationship that we have with organization, the relationship that we have with our health, with our body. How are all of those things being reflected back to us, right? The opposition to Saturn is saying this matters. This matters right now. You need to get organized. You need to take care of yourself. You need to prioritize these Virgo things in yourself, in your life, so that you actually have a foundation and something really grounded on to build upon. The flip side to that Venus-Saturn opposition is I'm not going to allow myself to have that. Very limited thinking. That's for other people, not me. That is possible for them, not me. I am not qualified enough. I am not smart enough. I am not young enough. Whatever it is, especially in Virgo, because Virgo in its lowest expression is very, very critical, very, very unkind. That's not the point. That's not the point of this. Now, if that is something that you do notice this week, it's good information. It's actually really good information, because what it's actually telling you is these belief systems are currently living within me. They are thoughts, they are belief systems, they are stories that I have accumulated over time. Saturn, right? Especially Saturn retrograde. Do they have to continue being mine? Do I have to continue having these limiting belief systems about myself and about what I'm capable of in this world? So even if this has nothing to do with anything manifesting, you don't have a goal, you don't want to move, you don't want a different job, maybe nothing in your life is changing. What this is going to bring up is, what are your thoughts about yourself? What is the relationship to yourself? What is your mental narrative, your internal narrative about yourself? And how does that make you feel about yourself? Very, very important things to look at, right? Now, this is even more true because, as I mentioned, we have the second of three squares between Mercury and Uranus. Mercury in Leo, Uranus in Taurus. The first square between Mercury and Leo and Uranus and Taurus was July 21st. The second one is going to be Saturday, August 17th, and the third one is going to be September 7th. The second square that's taking place on August 17th, Mercury is retrograde, and it's the middle of the story. Remember, I told you this is what gives us the beginning, the middle, and the end of the Mercury retrograde story. We're in the middle of it. So based on everything that I just explained about the Venus and Virgo opposition to Saturn retrograde in Pisces, this is going to give us more insight. And a square is a catalyst for change. Yes, it's tension, usually internal tension. It can be uncomfortable depending on how we're walking with this, but it's also great insight. It's incredible insight because Mercury in Leo is saying, this is who I am. This is who I am. And I am the only one responsible for myself, for my thoughts, for how I live this life, for how I shine my light onto this world. And the square to Uranus and Taurus is saying, if you liberate yourself, Uranus, from very strict, from very set ways, Taurus, you will lean into a much more authentic expression of yourself. And here's the thing, authenticity is very easeful. When we take off the layers of anything that doesn't allow us to be just ourselves, it is incredibly easeful. But I think that one of the biggest things that this week is showing us is that we have to own that. How much it truly is our responsibility to truly simply be ourselves. And that may seem like something that, of course, it's very obvious, but with the South Node transiting the sign of Libra, the way that we show up in the world, the way that we have a relationship with our life and the people in it, all of that is being activated. Sunday, August 18th, we have the Sun-Mercury conjunction in Leo at 27 degrees Leo. So this is the halfway point of the Mercury retrograde, right? The Sun-Mercury Cazimi. And this happens every single Mercury retrograde. Mercury is retrograde. It eventually meets with the sun, halfway point. Okay, so a few things about this. Considering the amount of tension that we might experience the whole week, I think we can actually gain a lot of clarity come the weekend, especially because when Mercury and the sun come together during a retrograde, the sun illuminates what we have been processing, revising, rethinking, reconsidering, all of the Mercury retrograde things, right? But this is in Leo. And I think that a lot of this has to do with us. This is how I feel about myself now. This is how I feel about the situation now. This is the stance I take in this situation now. This is where I know I belong in this relationship now, right? So I think it has a lot to do with that Leo energy of the identity, of the ego, of the self. Now, I do want to give you a heads up. We are preparing, right, for a full moon in Aquarius that is going to take place Monday, August 19th. So not only do we have that Mars-Jupiter conjunction, not only do we have that Mars-Jupiter conjunction square Saturn, we have a mutable cross, we have a Venus-Saturn opposition, we have that second square between Mercury and Uranus, we have the Sun-Mercury conjunction. It's a packed week, and it is all leading up to a full moon in Aquarius on August 19th. It's all a buildup. The week before a full moon, it's all an emotional buildup. So I'm giving you a heads up about this because the lesson for the full moon in Aquarius is going to be released on August 18th, Sunday, August 18th. But I'm letting you know this now because every single month there is an emotional buildup, and it's always the week leading up to the full moon of the month that we can feel it. And then the full moon becomes the point of culmination. And after that, it's a release. We can breathe. The week ahead is a lot, can feel like a lot, but I think that it has so much rich insight. Be sure to take care of yourself. Be sure that you are getting enough rest if that's what you need, because with this much energy moving around in the air, our bodies are processing a lot, especially with Virgo being activated. Our minds are going. Absolutely 100% they're going. Come back to yourself. Journal. If there is any week to journal, it's this week. Get it out of your head, get it out of your body. Go for walks, go for swims, be in nature, Epsom salt baths so that you can release a lot of that tension from your body. Anything that you can do for yourself, this is the week where you really want to do it, because this energy is activating. I think this energy is really activating higher consciousness for us. And we need to make space for it. We need to be open to it. And if we remain constricted, if we remain rigid, if we remain wanting to hold on to things or just trying to understand everything now, we're not doing ourselves a favor. And in fact, we're probably creating more stress than we need to. Okay. As always, may this be of service. So much love to you all. I will talk to you next week.